Hey, what's going on, everybody? VeeDotMe here. We're remaking a vid that I did long ago called Top 3 Builds for Brutality. The top 3 videos are some of the best videos that I have, but they're pretty old at this point, and I know that there's been so many changes in Dead Cells that you all deserve having an updated video. These are mostly from a 4 BC and higher perspective, as well as these are mostly my opinion. We want something that's easy enough to beat the game with, that doesn't require a ton of mechanical skill, and also you don't need the Exodia pools from the shop or affixes in order to make this work. We're up to version 2.4, which has gone through DLC, balance changes, and a ton more. That means there's tons and tons of actually good builds out there, but the 3 that I'm going to present today are my absolute favorites. Let's actually get started with an item that is from the Fatal Falls DLC, which are the Snake Fangs. Snake Fangs are actually a multitude of items all put together into one. It's a melee weapon that does really fast slashes, some of the fastest in the game. It teleports you to the closest enemy, so it has that built-in phaser movement. It also poisons the enemy, which gives it sort of an alchemic carbine effect. Don't forget, when a monster dies while poisoned, it can actually spew poison clouds on its dead body. And the way how the Snake Fangs are meant to be played is that you attack enemies that are poisoned and you get a crit. The odds of you actually getting a crit in a biome besides an elite or some other tanky monster is probably pretty slim, but we're actually not going to worry about that. What we're going to be focusing on in the biome is actually being able to attack every monster and actually kill them. Now, getting into the actual biome clear, the way how you actually clear the biome will also be dependent on your mutations. The mutations I like to take with the Snake Fangs include both Predator and Melee mutation. The Predator is there because when a monster isn't fully poisoned in the biome, you won't get the crit. So that means you will have to slash it multiple times for it to die. While you're attacking enemies with the melee mutation, they really can't attack you back due to the slow. And once the monster is dead, you'll go invisible. As you keep going through the biome with Lacerating Aura, Fire Grenade, Knife Dance, etc., you'll have monsters permanently slowed and you're going invisible at the same time for maximum safety. What I think makes the Snake Fang so good is not only can it kill basic enemies in the biome, but once you get to the boss, it will bar none carry you through the fight so long as you're pressing the square button. The secondary slot isn't super important here. Usually I just use a shield. That could be Bloodthirsty, that could be Frontline Shield, or even Ramparts off color so you have the bubble while attacking. But those pieces aren't super important here. What really matters are the skills and the mutations. The skills that we're going to be using are ones that are designed to be on the move. Don't get baited by stuff like Corrupted Power and Corrosive Cloud. The 2 biggest things that I take with Snake Fang are going to be the Lacerating Aura and Knife Dance. Knife Dance can get bleeding causes poisoning. I know that's a star to fix, but if you see it, you can probably just take that one to the end of the game. And then Lacerating Aura gets bonus damage to every affix. So you can get bonus damage to poison, that comes from your Snake Fangs, and bonus damage to bleeding, which is going to come from your Knife Dance, and the mutations that we're going to talk about later. Not only that, but Lacerating Aura has a really cool effect where you can get Poison Cloud when it ends, and that allows you to maintain the poison where you may think it will fall off. The last piece of that puzzle is Instinct of the Master of Arms, which we're going to call Instincto. That is your ticket to Lacerating Aura and Knife Dance spam. For the most part, when you get to the boss, we talk about meltation, the ability to just melt the boss's HP bar. Items like these with cooldown reduction is how that happened. And Snake Fangs applying a poison dot that just constantly ticks down the boss even if you're not attacking it gives you those really fancy boss kills that will lead you to no hits and legendary items. Now, there is a little bit of build variety in here. Sometimes I even like to bring in Frenzy to get my health back, because the idea of mowing through a biome while invisible, slashing enemies at maximum speed, it's really easy to maintain frenzy. And then of course, once you do get to a boss, if you want to remove the predator, you can throw in all kinds of defensive mutations such as disengage or vengeance, or you can even bring in no mercy. Speaking of bosses, the Snake Fang can kill pretty much every boss except maybe a slight struggle against the Scarecrow. Scarecrow will turn to face you a lot, and sometimes you will bait yourself into slashing instead of actually dodging away. And then him the King should be an easy clap considering you have Lacerating Aura and Knife Dance. All right, the next in the top 3 is something that has stood the test of time, patch over patch, and that's Stilleto. I really like this item because of phaser and open wounds. So whenever I talk about this build, it's not just Stilleto as the build, it's truly open wounds phaser Stilleto. When you phaser onto an enemy, you apply the bleed stack of open wounds, which gives you an automatic crit from Stilleto. Unlike something like Assassin's Dagger, you do not need to have a back or a front on the enemy to make this work. As long as you do a phaser, you will automatically add bleeding and you will crit for a huge chunk of damage. It's almost what I like to call a budget Assassin Dagger, if you want to do that Assassin Dagger type of gameplay. But once you get to a boss, it's better than Assassin's Dagger because it actually hits the boss in every direction. So again, we want to talk about ease of use. The Stilleto with open wounds applies that bleed so easily, you don't even really have to think about it. As for the secondary weapon, you could put in the kunai if you really want to, and try to alternate between your thrown dagger and the Stilleto. That does involve a little bit of extra gameplay, so in terms of a top 3 mentality, I kind of shy away from that. I'll typically just use frontline shield for the bonus damage on the Stilleto, because Bloodthirsty's extra bleeding probably not gonna move the needle as much as we might think it does. In terms of skills, this is another cooldown-centric build, so it's in our best interest to get some kind of power that does very well with cooldown reduction. Lacerating Aura, because again, Lacerator can get bonus damage to bleeding targets, and when you have enough cooldown reduction, that Lacerator is not going to stay offline for very long. If you don't happen to get the Lacerating Aura, because of course this is a roguelike, you can definitely go for either Knife Dance or Fire Grenade. I have seen people bring in Grapple Hook because of the mutations that we're going to talk about later. And finally, because this is a bleeding build, if you don't want to opt into the cooldown reduction, you could go with either Sinew Slicer or Cleaver and turn this into a pure bleed setup. So now that we have the actual items in the build, the mutations of course has to have open wounds. That's the whole point of the phaser setup, is so that you apply the bleed. After that, putting in Instinct of the Master of Arms, Instincto, gives you the cooldown reduction on the phaser, so you can do it every other monster. Because we're doing all of this phasing around the map, Scheme is a shoo-in in this build. Those do sort of pigeonhole you into the mutations with not a lot of leeway between them. But of course, you can try to add a defensive option to this, and that's, in my opinion, Melee Mutation. Melee, you could probably swap off the Scheme in a biome, and your phaser will actually slow the enemy that you teleport to and allow you to get in that damage where you may not have if you were kind of unlucky. Typically, the Lacerating Aura is there for all the small fry, so you don't really want to phaser to those. Just keep an eye out on the big targets to make sure you kill them as soon as they pop up. On to the actual boss fights. This is where the weapon really shines. Phaser gives you the stickiness to be able to fight things like Conjunctivius and Timekeeper with absolute ease. Scarecrow becomes a decent fight because you have all this ambient damage taking down such a low HP boss. And you're also able to fight Giant pretty easily because you're constantly critting either the eyeball or the fist. The only thing about the Giant is you do want to be careful of using phaser. Sometimes the phaser will teleport you to a fist instead of the eyeball. So if the eye is out, you may not even want to press the phaser button. And then finally, Hand of the King. Phaser is really good in that fight because you get to dodge Hand of the King's attacks by just pressing L2. Or if you jump on top of the ice to dodge his down slam, you can get to him ASAP by doing a teleport. All in all, very powerful build. Doesn't require a lot of mechanical skill, just a little bit of awareness of where that phaser is going to put you. And then finally, the third of the top 3 builds, and honestly the most exciting one for me, we're going back into Fatal Falls with the Ferryman's Lantern. Now, if you've seen my videos before, one of my most recent ones using this was a 20-second Scarecrow fight. And when I saw that footage, I knew instantly that this one has to be in the top 3. Question is, how do you do that? Ferryman's Lantern, bonus ammo on it if possible, and ammo mutation. We'll get to the mutations in just a second. But if you don't know how Ferryman's Lantern works, when you're killing monsters in a biome, you're collecting soul shards. Those souls will power up your alternate attack on the lantern, which are the missiles that do critical damage if you fire 3 or more. The souls will actually stay from one biome to the next one, or from a biome into a boss. And if you drop the lantern on the floor, the souls stay in it. What makes the lantern a little scary for a few people is they aren't sure how you go about getting souls. But luckily, Ferryman's Lantern has the benefit of victim slow nearby enemies. Remember, both pieces of the lantern are rolled separately. So when you get your lantern, you need it to have the victim slow nearby enemies, so that way you can mow through the map with just square and maintain your soul count for either the boss or a scary elite that pops up. As a matter of fact, I usually don't ever shoot in a biome unless it's an elite or something like a bat that I need easy targeting to kill. Ferryman's Lantern, because it's a slow weapon, gets a lot of base damage on it. But if you reach the event where you can't actually kill monsters in the first couple of hits, you want to bring in Predator. And this is where I think the Brutality version of the Ferryman's Lantern shines over the Tactics version, is I actually think it's easier to farm souls thanks to Predator than it is when you're playing Tactics. You can even bring in Melee Mutation. That way the monsters are slowed and can't react to you once the invisibility drops. So as I said, you're mowing through the biome with your basic square attack, killing every enemy, collecting souls, and then you want to prepare yourself for the boss. As a matter of fact, the way how I'm really playing the Ferryman's Lantern is I am playing towards the boss I'm gonna fight. My skills need to be something to help me land my soul shot. What you'll often see me use is an off-color Wings of the Crow or off-color Ice Grenade. Both of those work really effectively versus bosses and allow you to fire off your fully charged lantern shot without the boss being able to react to it. Some of the bosses, you want to fire the shots at different timings. For example, against Mamatic, you can fire maybe half against the eyeball and then the rest against Mama herself. Conjunctivius, you can kind of just fire off whenever it stands still. Timekeeper and Scarecrow, if you can lock them down, it gets you a really good target for soul shot. Against the Giant, you probably don't want to soul shot the fist and just shoot the eyeball instead. And then Hand of the King, you just shoot him whenever you get an opening. It could be during Wings of the Crow, it could be during an Ice Grenade, it could also be during his flag call, where you charge up Soul Shot and then fire through him and the flags at the same time. Some other good runner-ups for powers that allow you to fire off the Soul Shot are things like the Root Grenade, Crusher, which slows down the target. You could use Ice Armor, so if you do take a hit, it does the freeze and allows you to keep charging. Wolf Trap is an excellent setup for Conjunctivius, as she won't move while she's trapped. And finally, Grapple Hook got buffed on monsters that you can actually stun, so things like Concierge and Mamatic. You can grapple them and actually do the soul shot while they're stunned. Now, as for mutations, these are what's going to actually get you through the biomes and get you the boss kills a little more easily. As I said, Predator mutation, really good at getting you your souls. This is almost a guaranteed take for me. The next guaranteed take is actually ammo mutation, which doubles the amount of ammo you have in your soul shot. Now, don't bait yourself into holding down the entirety of the triangle button when you don't have to. As a matter of fact, some bosses, it's preferable to fire maybe half and then fire the rest after. And also, ammo mutation will drop the bonus ammo if you reset your mutations. So make sure that you don't swap before Hand of the King and try to swap a biome ahead of that. So typically the third mutation for me is either going to be emergency triage. So again, I get a bubble, which allows me to fire off my soul shot. It could be tranquility, so I get bonus damage at range. I know it's off color, but the base value is 25%, which is still fairly strong when you think about how strong soul shot is. And lastly, sometimes I'll even use Armadillo Pack with a nice shield like Rampart so that I can dodge roll through a boss's attack, get the bubble on the parry, and then charge my soul shot afterward. A lot of variety in here so long as you get either the Predator or the Melee mutation along with ammo. Alright, so there we have it. 3 of my absolute favorite builds for Brutality for winning games. Also an excellent reason for you to pick up the Fatal Falls DLC. And for those of you without Fatal Falls, here's a couple of extra bonus builds for you that are fairly potent and should be able to get you some pretty clean wins so long as you have like the gameplay that goes behind it. First one is Balanced Blade, where you're sitting on top of a turret and just applying tons and tons of damage so long as you land those hits. Blood Sword, pure bleed setups, allows you to get really easy bleed pops on bosses. It just sometimes suffers in biomes. Oil Sword with Torch in the backpack. Hopefully you can get the 100% bonus damage to burning oil on the Oil Sword to make this really shine. Alright, so that has been top 3 Brutality builds. Some of my absolute favorite builds to play in Dead Cells. If there's a build that you're a big fan of but you didn't see here, let me know in the comments. Finally, if you like this video, leave a like, subscribe if you like all the Dead Cells and other roguelikes that we play. Other than that, thank you for watching the video, and good luck in your next Dead Cells run.